Hello everybody and welcome to today's video. Today we're talking about the Tuesday election results out of the state of Oklahoma in its Republican primary, where we officially know that two of the candidates, Genter Drummond and Mike Mazzei, are advancing to a runoff election in the state of Oklahoma, as no candidate was able to break 50% of the vote, why this is very significant, and what this could all mean for the general election in November. So, okay, first things first. This election, obviously, no candidate was able to break 50%. Of roughly 402,917 votes, we saw Genter Drummond get 105,787 votes. Mike Mazzei ended up getting 104,629, ultimately amounting to roughly about a 1,000 vote lead for Drummond over Mazzei. Percentage-wise, 26.26% to Mazzei's 25.97%. Now, there were several other candidates in this race, and they did all take a pretty decent amount of the vote, at least the top six of them did. Chip Keating ended up getting about 18.45% of the vote, 74,356 votes. He finished in third. Jake Merrick finished in fourth, getting 58,314 votes, 14.47%. Charles McCall won 47,501 votes, 11.79% of the vote. Then all the other candidates amounted to about 1% or less than 1% of the vote for their respective vote totals. So what happened in this race? Well, I think the important context in this race we'll just start with that. So in this race, we have a lot of candidates, and for instance, Attorney General Genter Drummond. He raised, according to Wikipedia, significantly more money than any other statewide elected official in 2023, fueling rumors that he would run for governor. Now, in that same month, Black Wall Street Times reported that State Superintendent Ryan Walters was prepared for a 2026 governor campaign. U.S. Representative Kevin Hern was the first Republican contender to acknowledge he was considering a campaign as well in August of 2024, but then he ruled out a run that December after House Republicans won a very narrow majority in 2024, and I believe he did ultimately end up running for U.S. Senate. He's now the nominee for that race. And then in early 2025 here, we saw former State Senator Mike Mazzei post a gubernatorial campaign on his Facebook. So officially on January 13, 2025, Drummond announced his campaign for governor. He was the first major candidate to enter the race and second after Lisa Mitchell Haynes in terms of overall candidates. The former Oklahoma House Speaker Charles McCall announced his campaign on February 18th. Mazzei launched his on April 3rd. Former State Senator Jake Merrick endorsed or entered the race as well, and Kenneth Sturgill, a businessman. And then a former governor, Frank Keating's son, Chip Keating, entered the race as well. So now we know Genter Drummond, the current Attorney General, and Mike Mazzei, the former Oklahoma Secretary of Budget and State Senator, advanced to the runoff. So why did I want to let you know that? It's very significant. Because Genter Drummond, he has the endorsement of two local labor unions, the Fraternal Order of Police and the Firefighters Association, but this is what Mike Mazzei has. He has the endorsement of, obviously, the big fish. He has the endorsement of President Trump. That's the endorsement you want in a Republican primary, especially in a state like Oklahoma. But still, in this race, as we saw the results here, we saw that Genter Drummond overall and Mike Mazzei advanced to a runoff, and in a very close race. Mazzei actually finishes in second, 25.97%, Drummond 26.26%. So this is where things get interesting, because we see the results on the state here, and we can start going by overall total vote numbers here. Oklahoma County, this is where Oklahoma City is. Let me probably scroll up here. Oklahoma County, this is where Oklahoma City is, was very, very close. Drummond did ultimately narrowly defeat Mazzei here, 27.38% to 24.82%. And you go across the state here, look at a place like Tulsa, Mazzei ends up defeating Drummond here by a very narrow amount, though. And you look across the state here, in a lot of these counties, there's not a whole lot to break down from a election analysis standpoint, because when you look across the total vote of the state, sort of similar to the South Carolina primary, there's a lot of vote that didn't go to the top two candidates. They combined 25%, nearly almost 26% for both of them. You're looking at roughly about 52 or so percent of the overall statewide vote going to Drummond and Mazzei. So that means about 48% of the other vote went to these other candidates split up here. What does that mean for a runoff election where Drummond and Mazzei will be the two candidates? We essentially don't know how that's all going to play out because there's so much undecided vote here. And that's a problem you're kind of seeing for the South Carolina primary as well, where Pamela Evitt and Alan Wilson are facing off, who that is the lieutenant governor in Evitt versus the attorney general in Wilson. Genter Drummond, the attorney general, has the more high-profile office, but Mike Mazzei has the endorsement of President Trump, the most well-known figure in the Republican Party. But again, with so much undecided vote, it's really going to be interesting to see in the runoff how this ultimately goes, because we're really not going to know. 48% of the vote split among these candidates. What do these voters ultimately do in the runoff is where things are really going to ultimately decide. But it's very significant. This is a very close race where Drummond overall does get roughly about 1,000 more votes over Mazzei, even though Mazzei has the endorsement of President Trump. So how this goes is going to be very, very interesting. We can go county by county here and just go look at these areas that are smaller in population here over on the panhandle part of Oklahoma. Merrick wins narrowly here. You see Texas County, again, smaller number, but Drummond pulls off a narrow victory. Beaver County goes to Keating by about 1.87 by about 187 votes, about 5% of the overall vote here. We can look at even some of the larger counties overall by towns. We can look at Cleveland County, where Drummond pulls off a victory of 1.3% over Mazzei here. Canadian County, Merrick pulls off a victory of 1.5%. Rogers ends up going to Drummond by only, look at this, 3 votes. So you look across these counties and you go county by county across the state here. The main takeaway, and you've kind of, as the video's gone on, you've kind of seen me talk about this, and you know where I'm concluding here. This is an incredibly close race, and I think we're heading to a runoff that's incredibly close as well. On election night, we saw very close runoffs in Georgia. We saw them in Alabama, and we're going to be getting it pretty soon in South Carolina in that race as well. I think Oklahoma is going to be up there as well here. Even though Mazzei has the endorsement of President Trump, he still wasn't able to get, A, more votes than Genter Drummond did, but also, B, he wasn't even able to get more than 26% of the vote. With the endorsement of President Trump, you would hope you're getting at least like 35, 40, 45% of the vote with the backing of the president. But the fact that Mazzei only got about 26% and Drummond got 26.26%, to me, suggests we're in a very, very close race of how this could ultimately go down here. Now, in terms of what a runoff election between these could ultimately look like, well, we're still really TBD. Really TBD on this race. The polling heading into this race also showed a very competitive race with Mazzei at 26%, Drummond at 21%. That's the only poll to come out after President Trump threw his support behind Mazzei, and there were still 17% of the vote undecided. Now, obviously, we know roughly about 5% of that ended up going to Drummond, but Chip Keating, Jake Merrick, Charles McCall, and others seem to eat up the rest of that undecided vote here. So what does this mean for the runoff? I mean this in the most respectful way. We really don't know. It's really too early to say and too close to call in this race here what the roughly 48% of voters are going to do. This is where I think primaries are kind of like a very underrated, tricky election to try and predict, because you don't know how the voters are going to respond in a race like this where nearly half of the electorate did not support one of these two candidates. So it's going to be very interesting. I mean, you can look here geographically and say, well, where are the areas that maybe they did well, and could that be an indicator for the general at how they may do in some of these areas? But the margins are very close here. Like, Drummond won Oklahoma City about 1,400 or so votes here, and then Chip Keating finished in third place behind Mazzei. So you could say, well, Keating's voters are going to play a very large role in what happens here, but he also finished in third place at 18.45%. Jake Merrick finished at 14.47%, so not all that far behind as well, and Charles McCall's 11.79%. What do they decide to do? So really, from a runoff standpoint, I can't wait to see polling data come out of this race and where things go from here, because it's really, truly, I think, too close to call now to say for sure what's going to happen, as there wasn't like a lot of other races where, say, one candidate wins one portion of the state by a heavy amount. So we saw LaFleur County go for Mazzei by a large amount here, by a like 20-point margin. Adair County similar, Major County similar, and Grady County as well. But you didn't see like this entire part of the state go for Mazzei by like 20 points, and this part of the state go for Drummond by like 20 points. Oklahoma's geography is very spread out on the election map as these votes come in. What to me that says is we're looking at a race and a runoff that's going to be very, very close. And it honestly kind of reminds me of what we just saw, I think, about 2 weeks ago in Iowa, where the Republican Zach Land defeated the Trump-endorsed candidate Randy Feenstra, but I think it was like under 1 point or under 2 points when all the votes were in. And that was very much a shock. At that point, I think that was the first Trump-endorsed candidate to lose in the governor's race. I saw a interesting graphic earlier today. I think it may have been, I think when I was doing research, I think I may have saw a Fox News graphic on Google that said President Trump is like batting 100% or batting 1,000 on Senate endorsements, and I think he's batting 1,000% on House endorsements as well. But President Trump has gotten 2 races wrong from an endorsement standpoint, and they've only been from governor's races. The Georgia governor race and the Iowa governor's race this cycle thus far are the only races where Trump's endorsement has not amounted to the winner winning. So what that says is that Trump overall, if you're endorsed by Trump in the governor's race, you're still more likely to win than not. But of all the races, Senate, Oklahoma, or Senate, governor, or House, you have the worst chance of winning in the governor's race with Trump's endorsement than the Senate or the House. It seems as governor's races, we often say, are more competitive in the general election, that you won't see a Democratic senator getting elected out of Oklahoma, but there's a better chance of a Democratic governor there than a Democratic senator, because governor's races seem to be more localized, more focused on local issues. They're even more candidate focused as well, as voters maybe are more willing to vote for the candidate in the opposite party for governor than Senate. I live in the state of Massachusetts. I've seen this many years with Charlie Baker, and even before that, Mitt Romney being governor of the state of Massachusetts. Obviously, we have a Democratic governor now, but a state like Massachusetts is more willing to elect a Republican governor, but will never consider electing a Republican senator. And we see this even in Kansas right now. Kansas won't elect a Democrat for Senate, but they'll elect a Democratic governor in Laura Kelly. Oklahoma, I don't think we're necessarily there for the general election in terms of that standpoint. But does President Trump's endorsement mean automatically Mike Mazzei is going to end up winning the runoff? I would not say that. Does that mean he's not going to win it? I would also not say that. I really think this race is too close to call, and we have to get some polling data out of this race before we can start making definitive indications one way or the other in this primary. So bottom line for this primary was it was incredibly close. That's really all we have to say is it was incredibly close. Drummond and Mazzei will advance to the general. Having the endorsement of President Trump, Mike Mazzei, I would say gives them a little bit of a leg up in a state like Oklahoma, which on the general election side in 2024 voted for Trump by 34.3% of the vote. And that's why this is kind of shocking to me, is you're not going to find really another pro-Trump state out there in the United States of America more than Oklahoma, and Trump's endorsed candidate still technically finished in second place in this runoff primary. Now we go into the runoff, though. The Attorney General versus the Trump-endorsed candidate. It'll be interesting to see, can Mazzei win? Can he coalesce a lot of that 48% of the state vote that's undecided? What can he do in this race? It's going to be very fascinating to watch. We also, I just want to briefly touch on the Oklahoma Democratic primary, where Cindy Munson, the Democrat, ended up winning her primary, winning every single county across the state of Oklahoma. So she officially advances to the general election and is awaiting the Republican challenger. From a general election standpoint, though, solid Republican from every ranking except race to the White House. And in my rankings, no surprise here. I have it uncalled now just for the purpose of today's video, but Oklahoma, whichever Republican wins, will be at over a 15-point Republican win when everything is said and done here. Again, no surprise. As I mentioned, there are some states, Republican states, that are willing to elect a Democrat for governor like Kansas. Some blue states that are willing to elect Republican governors like even Vermont. Oklahoma is not going to be one of those states, though, I think, when everything is said and done. So, for the purpose of today's video, we have a runoff between Drummond and Mazzei. I really just have to express caution. This primary was super close. The runoff, I expect, will be very close as well. I just think it's too close to know for sure what's ultimately going to happen. We do know what the market odds say here over on this side of the screen, though we can even go a little bit closer as well here, which is Mazzei currently, as of, I think it is about midnight on June 17th, so basically as all the results came in, Mazzei's the heavy favorite over Genter Drummond right now. Again, that Trump support and endorsement certainly plays a massive role in this. At 80% chance to win, Drummond has about 18% chance to win. So clearly Mazzei is the favorite in this runoff based on the market side of things. The results, though, show a very, very competitive race between Drummond and Mazzei in this one. But that's where things ultimately do stand, ultimately remain in this primary. But I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. If you live in Oklahoma, if you voted in this primary, leave all your thoughts down below. Interested to hear what you think. Also, please remember to hit like and subscribe, as well as I post a new video every day at 3 p.m. And I'd really appreciate it if you could hit like and subscribe, because that really helps out me and my channel a ton. But for now, that is it. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in a future video.